Today we will be taking a biblical look at poverty to understand what the Bible has to say about poverty, what we should do to help them, and what happens when we don't. First, let's see how the Bible describes and defines poverty. Who are the poor? Bradley and Lindsley say in their book, For the Least of These, that the Bible usually describes the poor as those who lack even the basic necessities. The books of the Bible that we will be specifically looking at today come from the Old Testament. Let's start with an overview of the prophets' look at poverty. The former prophets, including Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, are not as explicit on the importance of the poor. The latter prophets, however, including Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12 minor prophets, do not hide it. According to Leslie Hopp, in her book, There Shall Be No Poor Among You, prophecy itself is not special to Israel, but some characteristics of the prophecies of Israel are special, including intense criticism of the monarchy and associated institutions, especially the judicial system, as you can see in Amos 5:7 and Micah 3:9-11. Also, special to the prophecies, there is a lot of criticism of wealthy landowners. This is because a lot of landless farmers were reduced to day work. We can see this in Micah 2:1-3 and Ezekiel 22:29. Also condemned by the prophets were fraudulent merchants, as seen in Hosea 12:7-8, Amos 8:5, and Micah 6:10-11. Still, Israel's prophets were not social or economic theorists. They spoke God's truth, not their own. They condemned poverty as the creation of the rich, who disregarded the norms of traditional Israelite morality because of their greed, as you can see in Amos 3:9 and Ezekiel 45:9. According to Boerma, in his book, The Rich, the Poor, and the Bible, wealth seems to be concentrated in a few hands through oppression. Boerma also says the poor man is oppressed and their cause is the rich oppressor, as can be seen in Ezekiel 45:9, Micah 2:1, and 6:10. The prophet's criticism is often directed against prosperous people in general. Prophecies of disaster are also directed at rich people as a group. According to the author Leslie Hopp, the prophecy of Amos is an unrelenting attack on the social evils that helped create poverty and a dependent underclass in 8th century Israel. Amos excoriated the wealthy because they seized the lands of the poor, corrupted the judicial system, and manipulated the economy for their benefit. Amos 2:6-7 lists most of this condemnation. In the judicial system, the elders and witnesses were relied upon for justice, but these people were taking bribes, as Amos says in 5:12. The rich were organized to extort the poor, but the poor were not organized. Therefore, this was not necessarily a class struggle, according to Leslie Hopp. Boerma confirms Hopp's idea that there is no class struggle because the poor are not organized. Boerma also confirms this idea that there was not exactly a class struggle, more just oppression by the rich as a group on individual poor people. Also, Amos's answer was not a class struggle or revolution. Only Yahweh's wrath would solve this problem. The prophet Micah primarily condemns the lower kingdom of Judah, though he does also include Samaria, which is the capital of Upper Israel. See Micah 1:2-7. Micah 3:1-4 describes the actions of the rich as cannibalism, similar to Ezekiel's condemnation in 34:2-3. Micah 3:9-12 is the harshest. It condemns judges, priests, and prophets, all who work for money and conspire against the poor. Micah's prophecy reflects the perspective of the peasantry. Still, Micah does not ask for extravagance for the poor, but simple pleasures, such as in Micah 4:4. where landowners are able to sit under their own vines. This is part of the prophecy for the days to come, when God will be teacher and prophet from his mount in Jerusalem. Part of this idyllic state is for individuals to enjoy their own land, which is in contrast to the extortion executed by the rich to steal poor people's land, such as in Micah 2, 1-2. You can see here that the prophets are not attacking private property rights, but a violation thereof, as Bradley and Lindsley highlight in their book. Boerma agrees that possession of land is of key importance, mostly because it is the means of development. Boerma also agrees that the prophets do not ask for anything ridiculous or try to teach economic theory. They only teach God's word, and they only ask for what he has apportioned. The prophet Micah also proclaims God's judgment, and, like Amos, believes that God will reestablish justice, but will first have to wipe out those who execute injustice. The new kingdom will not be for them. The paid prophets taught that God would protect them no matter what, because they are his chosen people. But Micah saw complete destruction. The prophet Ezekiel is a younger contemporary of Jeremiah. However, he is not in Judah. He is prophesying from Babylon, after he's been led into exile following the surrender of Jerusalem to Nebuchadnezzar in 597 BC, according to Leslie Hott. Ezekiel said that Jerusalem's fall and exile was God's judgment on Judah's sin. Ezekiel 18:7-8 describes a righteous person by listing traditional moral values. However, he outlines that these values do not describe the people of Israel in his day. The prophet equated oppression of the poor, the failure to restore a garment taken in pledge, and the taking of interest with idolatry. See Ezekiel 18:12-14. The prophet Ezekiel says that these are capital crimes that call for a sentence of death upon Judah and Jerusalem. Oppression is equated with idolatry due to a failure to deal with social and economic evils that turned God against Jerusalem. The people turned to other gods for comfort and security. Blame fell on Judah's leaders, the royal family, civil administrators, priests, and prophets, as you can see in Ezekiel 22:12 and 23-31. The leadership classes did not protect the poor, but committed acts of extortion, bribery. They confiscated property, and they oppressed the poor and needy. These were the same crimes that led to the destruction of Sodom, and Jerusalem had done worse. Similarly with Samaria, it was destroyed, but it was righteous compared to Jerusalem. Wealth was made through robbery and oppression, extortion and bribery. Similar to the prophet Amos, Ezekiel did not see poverty as chance circumstance, but saw that it was due to the unrighteousness of the rich. When Ezekiel hears that the temple has been destroyed, he offers hope. He instructs the leaders of Israel to do what is right, and says they will see return, renewal, and restoration. Daniel chapters 1-6 demonstrate that God does not abandon those faithful to the Torah. The Jews who were exiled were under immense pressure to abandon their religion, according to Leslie Hott. Daniel chapters 7-12 show the division between the leaders, who want to Hellenize Judaism, and the poor, who want to remain faithful. Daniel does not fully focus on the details of oppression or how to fix it. This book has an apocalyptic view, according to Leslie Hott, and sees oppression as a passing phenomenon. Justice will be established in God's coming kingdom. The only reference to the poor is in chapter 4, verse 24, where Daniel tells King Nebuchadnezzar that compassion for the poor may atone for his sins. The themes of poverty are not as central in the other books that we will be looking at today. For example, Lamentations, which has a theme of compassion, really only touches on the subject in chapter 4, verse 5, which speaks of a reversal of fortunes. Hosea has two relevant passages. The first is chapter 4, 1-3, which speaks on a total collapse of law and order. The second is chapter 12, 7-8, which condemns fraudulent merchants who defraud their customers. The poor are not mentioned explicitly at all in the books of Joel, Obadiah, or Jonah. Instead, each of these books have themes that reflect God's character and his plan for his people. In conclusion, the rich people in these books are condemned for their oppression of the poor. The poor are described as righteous, not for their right acts, but because their rights have been ignored and need to be set right, as explained by Leslie Hott. The rich will be struck down in God's judgment. Still, there is hope of revival and justice, but it is far off. It is a coming day, and the rich are not promised to be a part of this, but will likely be cut off. We should adopt Daniel's eternal perspective and remain loyal, even through trials and tribulation. We may face persecution, but it is passing, just like Paul says in Romans 8:18.